Hey Reddit. Let's talk about humiliation. Not the kind where you spill coffee on yourself or wave at someone who wasn't waving at you. No. I mean the quiet, grinding humiliation of being treated like you don't matter anymore. I'm Carly. I'm 63. I live in Pine Valley, Pennsylvania, population 3008 on a good day, and that includes cows. I was the school librarian here for 35 years before I retired. They closed the damn library and turned it into a Chromebook closet. My husband passed away 2 winters ago. Aneurysm. Quick. Brutal. 1 minute he was singing along to Hall & Oates while fixing the garage door, and the next I was sitting in a numb blur of casseroles and condolence cards. So I threw myself into the only thing that made sense. Books? I started volunteering at the Pine Valley Public Library. Not glamorous, but familiar. I shelved books, helped confused teens find that one blue book with the girl on the cover, and fixed more printer jams than I cared to count. Then came Derek. Derek with a K, who introduced himself like a TED Talk and looked like he vaped emotions out of his soul. He was hired as the new library director last spring. Fresh from an innovation-focused urban initiative in Pittsburgh, he came in wearing tight pants, angular glasses, and a man bun so smug I swear it had its own Twitter account. He called the library a literary hub for multisensory experiences. He replaced the circulation desk with a welcome pod. He removed the microfiche machine, blasphemy, and converted the magazine room into a podcast recording booth. I tried to be nice. Really. I even brought him banana bread once. He asked if it was gluten-free and then left it on a windowsill for the birds. Still, I kept volunteering. Because it wasn't his library. It was ours. The community's. Mine. But it all changed the day of the Digital Discovery Day. Let me set the scene. Saturday morning. The library is bustling. Derek had invited local teens for a tech immersion scavenger hunt. Basically a glorified QR code game. I was helping a patron in large print. Sweet Mr. Capelli, 82, legally blind, smells like pine tar and licorice when I noticed Derek leading a group of kids right through reference. He spots me. Everyone, this is Carly, he says. She's one of our legacy volunteers. Like, actual legacy. She can show you how we used to find books before Google. Cue laughter from a pack of hoodie-wearing 15-year-olds. I froze. He didn't even notice. He kept walking, tossing over his shoulder. She still uses the cart catalog sometimes. It's adorable. Adorable. Like a crocheted chicken. Like a YouTube video of a cat sneezing. Like a woman who gave her life to literacy was now a mascot. I went home that night, stared at my old circulation badge from the high school library, and cried into a lean cuisine. But that wasn't the worst part. No. The worst part came the next week when I got an email from Derek's assistant, a 22-year-old named Maya with a sociology degree and a permanent, tone. It said, Dear Carly, at this time we're streamlining volunteer roles to make space for digital ambassadors. Thank you for your service. We wish you all the best in your future literary endeavors. Future literary endeavors. I swear I heard an iPad laugh. I was fired. From a volunteer position. At a public library. In a town where I helped raise 3 generations of readers. I didn't respond. Not then. Instead, I went to the basement. Dusted off my filing cabinets. And started making a list. See, Derek thought I was outdated. But I've got decades of knowledge stored in my brain. I remember every weird patron who tried to steal encyclopedias. Every overdue book that never came back. Every grant Pine Valley Public ever applied for and whether they got it. And as it turns out, Derek had started bragging about a new state grant we'd supposedly received for youth digital literacy. Only problem? I called my friend Marcia who sits on the county funding committee. She said, we never awarded Pine Valley that grant. They weren't even on the short list. Interesting. Because Derek had told the local paper the money was secured. And he just installed new tablets. Labeled funded by the Youth Digital Now grant. So I did what any adorable legacy-labeled old librarian would do. I started cataloging his lies. I went full Dewey Decimal on his ass. 1.642 internet fraud. 25.524 library admin corruption. 346.7305 legal consequences of forged documents. I even recruited a team. Mrs. Grunwald, retired IRS clerk with a taste for revenge. Howard Lee, ex-postmaster with a working knowledge of every address in town. and Sister Marlene, who once ran the Catholic school library and could smell a falsified funding record like a bloodhound in a habit. We met at the donut shop. We called ourselves the Deways. And we got to work. Because this man had tried to erase me. Erase us. Our work. Our legacy. Our shelves. But he forgot something crucial. The past is well organized. And we know exactly where to find it. More soon if you want to see how Derek's digital empire came crashing down just in time for his State of the Library address. Okay, Reddit. Let's talk about how you dismantle a smug public library director who thinks the Dewey Decimal System is outdated patriarchy. You start with paper. Because for all his cloud-stored buzzwords, Derek never figured out how much power still lived in hard copies. And this was Pine Valley, a town that files everything. Hell, my neighbor still pays her water bill by envelope and prayer. So I went to the back room. Not the innovation nook, or the quiet curation lounge his renames gag me. I mean the literal archive basement, where humidity and time conspired to turn grant records into brittle gold. I dusted off 2 filing cabinets, both still labeled in my handwriting from 1998. There it was. Youth Digital Now Grant, 2022 application, denied. Stamped. Initialed. Annotated in red ink with overly vague implementation strategy. Applicant lacks measurable outcomes. That applicant? Derek. And yet, in February of this year, he told the Board of Trustees we'd been awarded that same grant. Even issued a press release to the Pine Valley Herald about a historic $35,000 infusion for digital youth literacy, which apparently meant installing 12 iPads with educational content, including, I kid you not, an interactive yoga app that taught downward dog through a suggestive animated instructor named Flowla. That's where my next Dewey stepped in. Howard Lee. Vietnam vet. Postal carrier for 42 years. Hates golf, loves records. He remembered seeing a set of tablet shipments not addressed to the library, but to Derek's home address, rerouted later by clerical error. I checked our acquisition log. The tablets? Never logged in. No asset tags. No invoice entries. No board approval. Derek just installed them. And the kicker? I found an invoice, printed from a generic PDF generator site, claiming the grant money had covered these assets. Which is weird considering the grant was denied. So where did the money come from? We suspected local funds. Specifically a $40,000 community development fund that had been rolled into library operations last year after a rushed city council vote. And who proposed that merge? Derek. He said it would streamline public engagement and foster interdisciplinary resource accessibility. Translation, give him more money to play Apple Store. That's when we brought in Grunwald. Yes, she insists on her last name only. IRS style. She cross-checked the town's budget reports from the last 3 years against library acquisitions and grant awards. There was a $12,300 miscellaneous tech purchase, filed under Youth Services Enhancement. You know what wasn't enhanced? The youth. Unless learning to spell Pilates in Sanskrit counts. At this point, the Deways had collected. False public statement. Misappropriation of municipal funds. Forged documentation. Procurement without board approval. So I did what I hadn't done in 5 years. I called my lawyer, James Feinberg. Old, blunt, and once sued the state for losing his pension check in a fax machine. He read the documents, whistled, and said, "You've got a full broomstick of wrongdoing here. What's your angle?" I told him I didn't want to sue. I wanted spectacle. Because Derek wasn't just a thief. He was a performative thief. He installed a poetry VR station that no one used and then publicly mocked my love of card catalogs. He deserved a takedown in front of everyone he tried to impress. And what better time than the upcoming annual budget review and donors showcase? A real gala affair. Local politicians. Regional press. A table of scones so dry they double as weaponry. Derek would be presenting his vision for the next phase of Pine Valley Library's digital renaissance. Well, my vision included a projector, a clicker, and a PowerPoint file named Youth Grant Fraud, The Untold Story. While Derek rehearsed his data visualization for the mayor, I spent my nights practicing a different presentation. Labeled folders. Labeled slides. I even laminated the exhibits. I'm old school like that. But the final detail? Came from Sister Marlene. A tiny nun with a soul forged from steel and catechism. She found, buried in old committee notes, an unused board clause from 2007 that gave special permission for volunteer representatives to speak at fiscal reviews when prior staff experience is relevant. Guess who was the longest-serving staff member still in town? Guess who qualified? Me. The DeWays met one last time over bear claws at the diner. Are you ready? Howard asked. I was born ready, I said. And laminated for good measure. The review was in 3 days. And Derek? Still calling me adorable. That's fine. Because I was about to teach him how dangerous it is to underestimate a librarian. Especially one who can alphabetize your downfall. The annual budget review and donors showcase was held in the library's main event hall, formerly the periodicals room, now known as the Imaginarium, which Derek described as the space for ideas to dance. It still smelled like stale Newsweek and a busted HVAC system, but okay. The guest list included local council members, school board reps, 1 board state senator's aide, 2 reporters from the Pine Valley Herald, about 50 well-meaning residents in their casual nice clothes, and me in my best navy blouse, a brooch shaped like a quill, and the calm face of a woman who spent the last 6 weeks preparing to drop a bomb and adjust her cardigan after. Derek strutted in looking like Steve Jobs by way of IKEA. Tight slacks, turtleneck, clicker in hand. He opened with a slide labeled Future Forward Literacy, From Paper to Pixels. God help me. He launched into a polished monologue about engagement metrics, modern resource interfaces, and community integration pipelines. Every third word was pure Silicon Valley rot. Slide after slide of graphs with no y-axis, stock photos of diverse teens smiling at tablets, and one very unfunny meme comparing card catalogs to rotary phones. I could feel Sister Marlene gripping her rosary like it was a smoke grenade. Then he clicked to a bar chart titled Impact of Youth Digital Now Grant. And that was my moment. I stood. He froze mid-sentence. Every head turned. Derek, still smiling like I was just getting up to use the restroom, said, "Oh, Carly. I didn't realize you were attending today. Always good to see our legacy voices engaged." "Funny you say that," I replied, walking to the front. "Because this legacy voice has something to say." Whispers. Tension. The Herald reporter leaned forward with interest for the first time all evening. From my tote bag, I pulled out my laptop and a neatly labeled flash drive. Supplemental review materials, I said to the AV assistant. Slide change. The room went dead silent. Slide 1. Youth Digital Now Grant. Official Denial Letter. Pennsylvania State Literacy Fund, 2022. Derek's face twitched. Slide 2. Quote from Derek's public statement. We've secured $35,000 for youth digital learning. Slide 3. Invoice for iPads, delivered to Derek's home with no asset registration. I could feel the oxygen get sucked out of the room like someone had just opened a library door in January. Slide 4. Budget entry, miscellaneous tech, $12,300, highlighted in red. Slide 5. Statement from Grant Committee Chairwoman, Marcia. Bless her, Pine Valley Library was not awarded this grant. No funds were dispersed. I turned to the crowd. I was removed from this library for being outdated, for helping people the old-fashioned way, for believing that books and facts and truth still mattered. I paused. Just enough time for people to process. But the real problem isn't that I prefer Dewey to an app. The problem is that while Derek was installing yoga iPads and self-branding as a literary futurist, he was misrepresenting grant money, misappropriating public funds, and lying to all of you. Dead. Silence. Then. Holy hell, whispered the aide from the senator's office. I handed a folder to the mayor, another to the library board chair, one to the Herald reporter, who immediately started flipping through with a look of delighted horror. Derek tried to speak. This is a misunderstanding. A miscommunication. You submitted a fake invoice for funds that never existed, I said. The misunderstanding is thinking you could get away with it in a town where we still read footnotes. Applause. I'm not exaggerating. Actual applause. From the seniors. From the staff. Even from the weird teen who skateboards inside sometimes and calls me Library Gandalf. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a goldfish trying to gaslight its owner. The board chair stood. We're calling an emergency closed-door session. Effective immediately. Derek tried to protest. Mr. Klein, said the mayor, you are dismissed from this meeting. Dismissed. Like a noisy patron. Like a man caught watching adult VR content on library Wi-Fi. Like a fraud. He left through the side door. No man bun bounce. Just a quiet, defeated shuffle. Afterward, people came up to me with gratitude, hugs, questions. The Herald ran the story under. Scandal at the Stacks. Library director falsified grant, volunteer uncovers truth. Guess what photo they used? Me. Pointing at a screen. In mid-sentence. Looking like I was about to assign summer reading to a room full of liars. The Dways celebrated at Perkins. Sister Marlene ordered wine. She said Jesus would approve. We weren't done. Because there was still the question of where the rest of the money went. And if Derek really acted alone. Because fraud leaves a paper trail. And Carly, the adorable legacy librarian? She still knew how to read between the lines. You'd think getting publicly dragged out of a budget meeting would humble a man. Not Derek. After his spectacular removal, the board suspended him, pending formal investigation, which in bureaucrat speak means, we know he's guilty but our lawyer wants 3 weeks to write it nicely. He vanished from the library but not from town. He was still seen at the Juicewell Cafe, sipping beetroot smoothies, laptop open like he was pitching startups to himself. He even posted a LinkedIn update the day after the expose. Taking some time to realign my professional mission. New chapter coming. #resilience, #innovate literacy. Innovate this, Derek. But we weren't done. Because something about his funding sleight of hand didn't sit right with me. See, the $12,300 for iPads was just the beginning. Grunwald and I combed through public purchase records for the last 2 fiscal years and suddenly there were patterns. Too many. Like the recurring vendor name, Community Collective Synergy Services, LLC. Every month. $1,750 here. $2,200 there. Labeled as consulting or event planning. Only problem? No one ever saw these events. There were no flyers. No photos. No attendance logs. And Pine Valley is the kind of place where someone sneezes during town hall and it ends up on Facebook. So who is CC Sess? A quick search of Pennsylvania LLC records pulled it up. Registered 3 years ago. Guess whose name was on the articles of incorporation? Derek K. Klein. Address? A P.O. Box downtown. Contact email? DerekKReads2021@gmail.com. Professional. I sat back in my kitchen chair and said, out loud, you absolute bastard. Because this was textbook self-dealing. He created a fake consulting company, submitted fake invoices to the library, then paid himself out of taxpayer money. The Dways gathered that night like an Avengers reunion, minus spandex. Sister Marlene brought coffee. Grunwald brought more folders. Howard brought donuts, and bless him, he alphabetized them by glaze. I don't want to stop at exposure, I told them. I want an audit. A real one. With numbers, statements, and signatures. So we filed a formal request through Pennsylvania's right-to-know law. Every public entity in the state is subject to transparency rules. The library board tried to stall. Pending legal counsel. Under review. Sensitive data. Grunwald responded with a paragraph of legalese so sharp it could have punctured a server. And 2 days later? Boom. We got it. Receipts. Transfer logs. Board minutes. Payments. All of it. Over 2 years, Derek had funneled more than $38,000 to Community Collective Synergy Services, LLC. None of it went through competitive bidding. Most of it wasn't even approved. Some of it came directly from donor raise funds meant for youth programming. Yeah, that's right. The same money that was raised by kids selling raffle tickets. The same funds we used to run summer reading challenges and STEM days. He was robbing the kids. With a smile. And a hashtag. I was done being polite. I called Layla, one of the board members, the only one with a working moral compass and no Instagram for her cat. I said, you need to hear what we found. And if the board doesn't act, I'm going to the press again. This time with numbers. She called back an hour later. Carly, there's going to be an emergency vote next week. And an external audit. You'll be invited. Please bring your documents. Oh honey. I was bringing laminated exhibits in matching folders. But then something happened I didn't expect. I got an email. From Derek. Subject line, let's talk. I stared at it for a long time. It said, Carly, I know you're angry. But this doesn't have to go any further. We're both part of the same community. I'm willing to quietly resign and walk away. Let's not ruin lives. D. Ruin lives? He was the ruin. He called me obsolete, erased years of community work, and siphoned children's resources into his personal slush fund. I didn't reply, but I did forward it to Layla. Then I printed it out, stapled it to the top of my packet labeled Evidence, Supplemental Attempted Quiet Exit. Because here's the thing about men like Derek. They believe exposure is the worst that can happen to them. But what they forget is women like me have been surviving exposure our whole lives. He called me legacy. He called me cute. He thought I'd fold. But I'm still standing. And I've got 2 parts left. The emergency board meeting was held on a Wednesday night. Gray, rainy, appropriately dramatic. I wore my "Don't Test Me" scarf burgundy with tiny skulls hidden in the pattern. Sister Marlene wore full black like she was going to a funeral. She was. Grunwald carried in a banker's box labeled DK, Miscellaneous, Lies. Howard brought cough drops in case I'm called to read the statement dramatically. We weren't playing. The room was packed. Local reporters, donors, former library staff, a dozen teenagers pretending not to care but filming on their phones for TikTok. Then Derek walked in. Yes, Derek. Still wearing a badge. Still dressed like a failed tech CEO auditioning for Shark Tank. Still oozing confidence like the floor wasn't about to open and drop him straight into professional hell. The board opened with formalities. Layla read the audit summary. Over $38,000 in disbursed payments to an unregistered vendor now linked directly to Mr. Klein. No supporting documentation for services rendered. Misrepresentation of grant funds. Misuse of budgeted allocations for youth programming. You'd think he'd fold. But no. He stood, adjusted his sleeves and said, I'd like to clarify a few things. The gall. He launched into a 10-minute stream of buzzwords. Entrepreneurial vision, legacy resistance to change, blurred lines of internal contracting. My only intention was to modernize. The man actually used the phrase institutional friction caused by nostalgia. At one point he gestured toward me and said, and while I respect Carly's commitment, I think we all know she struggled to adapt to the new literacy landscape. Oh no, he didn't. I stood. Layla nodded. It was my turn. I opened my folder labeled, Statement, Carly K., former librarian, currently furious. Mr. Klein, thank you for your explanation, but let me clarify a few things from this side of the desk. Slide 1. Screenshot of Derek's LLC registration. Dated 3 months before his hiring. Slide 2. Library vendor payment log. CC says billed $1,800 for engagement strategy deliverables during the week. The strategy involved a canceled trivia night due to low turnout. Slide 3. Comparison of staff resignations pre and post Derek. 7 departures, all citing toxic leadership or directionless digital emphasis. Slide 4. A pie chart of library spending. Labeled, What the Kids Lost. Youth books, down 60%. Digital programs, up 300%. Actual attendance, down 25%. And then I said the thing that really landed. This wasn't modernization. It was monetization. And it didn't make us better, it made us shallow. The room? Pin drop silent. Until one of the board members whispered, "Holy shit," under his breath. The Herald reporter heard it. Quoted it the next day. Derek tried again. You're twisting this. It was never about money. It was about vision. So I pulled out the final slide. A check. Made out from the library's operating budget to Community Collective Synergy Services. Signed by Derek. Memo line, Digital Literacy Planning, Phase 3. Phase 3 was yoga apps in one TikTok workshop hosted by a girl who later admitted she just Googled how to go viral and read BuzzFeed slides. That was it. The board voted on the spot. Motion to terminate Derek K. Klein approved 7-0. Effective immediately. Library laptop confiscated. Badge revoked. Derek sat there stunned. Like someone who just got surprise tested on material he thought he'd plagiarized well enough to fake. He stood up slowly. You've made a mistake, he said. This is going to look very bad for all of you. Layla responded. No, Derek. It looks bad for you. We're just cleaning up. That night, the Deways and I went to Denny's. We ordered pancakes, wine, don't ask, and laughed until Marlene snorted iced tea through her nose. I almost wish he'd fought harder, Howard said. Grunwald replied, I almost wish we'd billed him for emotional labor. I smiled. But I wasn't done. because Derek's damage didn't stop at fraud. He left behind a broken budget, a fractured staff, and a community that felt ignored. So I ran for something bigger. More on that in the final chapter. So, Derek's out. The audit was filed. The Herald published a front-page story with the headline, Fiction section, Library Director Fired Over Fake Grants and Fuzzy Math. They later changed it to something more polite, but I kept the early print and had it framed. It now hangs above my desk next to my late husband's Beatles vinyl collection and my prized 1983 Dewey Conference mug. But here's the thing, after you burn down a corrupt regime, someone has to rebuild the house. And in our case, that someone turned out to be me. See, after Derek was fired and the interim director brought in, there was a quiet panic inside the board. No one wanted to admit they'd been asleep at the wheel. Several members resigned, citing health reasons and a need to focus on family. Read, they knew the pitchforks were coming. At the next public meeting, Layla stood up and said, "We need new leadership. And I nominate Carly." The vote passed. Unanimously. Me. That adorable legacy. Now president of the Pine Valley Library Board. I didn't cry. But I did buy new shoes. Here's what we did next. Reinstated the physical card catalog not as the only system, but as a symbol. You wouldn't believe how many teens thought it was aesthetic. One even used it for a TikTok, #AnalogQueen. I blushed for a week. Reallocated the digital budget. Goodbye yoga avatars. Hello, audiobook accessibility and proper e-reader training for seniors. Created a community oversight committee with real teeth. You want to pitch a library program? You sit in a room with actual patrons and explain your budget line by line. And yes, we hauled the podcast booth into storage and replaced it with a corner reading nook filled with thrifted armchairs and soft lighting. It's now the most used spot in the building. We called it the Quiet Revolution. And the town? They came back. Circulation jumped 22%. Volunteer applications tripled. People brought their kids. Their grandparents. One man even donated his wife's collection of rare sci-fi zines because Carly brought the soul back. I didn't even know I had that much soul left. One day, I was shelving books. Yes, I still shelve. Power is no excuse not to do real work. And I saw a girl, maybe 13, flipping through a typewriter manual. "Do you know how to use one of these?" she asked. I smiled. "Not only do I know, I can show you how to load a ribbon with one hand while balancing a latte." She laughed. That laugh, it made everything worth it. As for Derek, he left town. Moved somewhere coastal. Started a newsletter about navigating professional trauma. Last I checked, he was offering $99 Zoom workshops on authentic leadership. Of course he was. But here, in Pine Valley, his name's only mentioned in hushed tones and budgetary warnings. When someone proposes a bad idea, the staff whispers, "That's a little Derek why." It's my favorite inside joke. I get asked sometimes if I miss my old role, just being a volunteer. Just shelving. Just existing quietly. The truth? I miss nothing. Because now I do all that and have the power to protect it. To make sure that no one like Derek ever slides in again, calling passion obsolete and experience dead weight. And when people ask how I pulled it off, I say this. Never underestimate a woman who knows where everything is filed. That's the story. The fraud. The fallout. The deways. The comeback. All of it. And yes, I still alphabetize my spice rack. Wanna fight me?